Okay, so can you hear me? Does it work? Okay. Better? Okay. Test? Okay. Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Michael, and today I want to give you a short presentation about a big term called presence in the co-located, playful, interactive context. And before getting into the details, let me give you some info about myself. So that's my job. Typically at 8 o'clock in the morning. So as you might guess, or as you can see, I'm not developing games, I'm teaching. To be more precise, I teach game design, game arts, usability and interaction design at the University of Applied Sciences, Upper Austria in Hagenberg. And apart from teaching, I'm also interested in research. So 2 years ago, some fellow colleagues and I founded the research group Playful Interactive Environments, in short PI, that deals with the topic games from various perspectives. And to give a short overview of the things that we are doing, some of the 3 pillars that we are working on. So we have projects that deal with persuasive games, gamification. So we think about games to motivate people, for instance, for physical activity or for certain behavior change. Also, we are interested in intergenerational playful scenarios, meaning that we create games for old and young, bring them together. And this talk will focus on this 3rd pillar. That's the reason why it's bigger than the other one. It will deal with especially social co-located games and also eye tracking in this regard. So we are not just theorists, we are trying to developing games, creating game prototypes to validate our theories, to put things into practice, and to give an impression of the things that we are doing. This is just one example. Since 2012, we have a collaboration with the Ars Electronica in Linz, where we create games for a huge interaction context. So you can see here we have a laser ranging system that tracks people, and they use their body, their position, to interact with the game. So this is a game called Fish Feast, where you have to eat the fish and be successful, and so on. So different prototypes that we are working on since 2012. And yeah, what we did, we edited this setup, we made adjustments to the setup, included other elements, and currently we are working on a system called the Pi Deck, which is also an interactive installation with this kind of multi-user environment with a huge interaction space. So it's about 25 to 150 square meters. And the neat thing here is that we are now able to integrate other devices, like VR devices, so we can have multiple VR devices in this interaction space, and also mobile devices, and that's the setup we create games. And also a very recent example that we use this kind of VR technology in conjunction with this kind of laser tracking technology. You can see here we have Samsung Gear VR devices, and for multiple users. So they are, in this case, we have 2 VR users that interact within this virtual space. Yeah, some people are doing some funny stuff with it. And these 2 people are then tracked, and you can see this visualization here. And the nice thing is also here that you can also include spectators into this gaming experience. So people can walk in this interactive space and participate. So these are the 2 VR users, and this is one of the spectators that walks through this space. So we have this kind of combined view of this virtual and the real space. So we use this kind of, workbench or experimental setup to investigate several things. So since we are a research group, we are interested in several things. So we have gaming experience, flow, these kind of experience that emerge during a gameplay. We're also interested in immersion and also presence. So these things are often mixed. I have to admit, when I started researching on the term presence, I had this problem that is often mixed with immersion. And after reading tons of papers, I was not sure if I found really the difference between those two. So also in marketing and in academia, there's this kind of mixture between those two, and in some cases But generally, I want to provide you a definition of presence. What can be understood behind it, since it's a very hyped term, especially recently when VR emerged. So the term presence itself is rather old. It was coined by Marvin Minsky in the 1980s. We talked about it, we named it as telepresence. And generally speaking, he described it as a psychological state where you inhabit a mediated or virtual environment where the artificiality is not noticed. So you do not notice that you are in an artificial setting. And to pinpoint this experience, you have this feeling of being there, being in this mediated virtual space. And this may sound simple, so or you can say, okay, that's presence, so mission accomplished, so it's not that easy. The problem here is that presence is not presence. Presence can be seen as a multifaceted phenomenon that addresses several processes, several senses. In this case, we have three processes distinguished by Schulze and his colleagues, where we have this differentiation between sensory, affective, and cognitive, meaning that presence is a sensory process, it's an emotional process, you can see it on this affective processing component, and also it's a rational one, so it's cognitive processing. And to get an understanding and to get this into the right picture, Tamburini and Bowman made also this differentiation by providing three components, so you can see, of course there are tons of other definitions, but you can see presence from three dimensions or components. So the first dimension would be spatial presence, which is also often very associated with immersive experiences. So it's this kind of this relation between immersion and presence. It's this impression of being physically there. So you have the feeling of being in this virtual environment. And also what is more, you have the feeling of being able to act, to leave traces into this world. So you have the feeling of being there and being able to act. Very important thing. The second dimension is so-called self-presence, which gives you the impression of that the mediated self, that the avatar that is represented in the game world, that's you, that's the actual self. So you do not differentiate between those two states, so to say. And the third one, which we are especially interested in, since we are working with shared game spaces, games with different roles, think about this VR and spectator setting, is this so-called social presence, where the simulation of humans and non-humans inhabiting this virtual world is not noticed by the user, this artificial setting. So these kind of social actors are perceived as real humans. And what is interesting to see is that studies found out that since there is no difference between those two, humans tend to apply social rules like in a real human-to-human setting. So the same social rules apply in a mediated environment. Okay, so you might think that's very nice. What's the practical application behind these things? We created several game prototypes to find out if this kind of phenomena occur and how, in which way. And I want to give you two examples where we made research, and one, since I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, eye tracking, we made studies that uses kind of gaze interaction, so you use your gaze in order to interact with a game, and made social presence measurements. And for those of you who are not familiar with eye tracking technology, so this is just one recent example that was released. That's the game Tom Clancy's The Division. And what you can see here is this dot here, that's the gaze point of the user. So you are watching the game scenery and you can interact with the game. So you, for instance, can navigate through walls, you can use this kind of additional information to navigate with your avatar. And it's a very cheap technology. I think it was introduced, the technology itself is in general very old. It's used for web, mainly web design analysis, but here I think it was in the last 5 years or so that companies like Tobii or SMI introduced this kind of technology to interact with games. So we use this kind of technology in order to investigate social presence, but not in a typical way. So we do not use this kind of technology to use it as an input device for the user, but as a shared gaze experience. So what does this mean? We have a multi-user setup. We have two PCs here, and the neat thing here is that you can see what the other one is watching. So you can see where the other one is looking at the screen, and we use these kind of things to evaluate competitive settings, cooperative settings, cooperative games. You can see this very simplistic schematic of the technical setup. So 2 PCs, the eye tracking application, and the thing here is we use this kind of eye tracking information that is which is overlaid then on the game itself. And we have some very nice results here that we're going to present at several conferences at the ICC in Vienna and also in Japan in November, where we show the results of these things. So we tested, for instance, to give an impression of the things that we tested, we had cooperative games like Screen Sheet. So does anyone of you know this kind of Screen Sheet game? It's a very funny thing. It's a split screen experience, and the thing here is that players are not visible, and you have to derive from the current player position where the player really is in the game, and you have to look. And on the other hand, we have games, we tested out games like Ip and Op. We have this kind of cooperative experience, and we use this kind of gaze visualization to enhance this kind of cooperative experience. Okay, so this was just one example. We have another one where we looked at social presence, or where we're gonna look at social presence. So that's a prototype that we are currently working on, namely VR devices. So we want to include VR devices into this social presence setup. So think about a situation where someone is wearing a VR device and he's playing with other players that use this kind of typical interaction techniques. And we want to find out if there, how these people perceive other players. So is there a difference between the social presence experience when you wear a VR device and a traditional technique, and in which way is it more pronounced, or what is the quality behind it? And for that, we are currently developing a game prototype called Invisible Walls, which will be shown at the Vienna Design Week. And this is a very primitive top-down schematic of this thing. So the basic setup is that one user has an HTC Vive, and in front of him or her there are players walking around, so they are in real space and they are tracked with our laser ranging system, and this guy sees these kind of persons that are walking around, and also the other guys that are walking around here are shown at the projection at the back of the player. So I am a VR user, you are the people walking around, and behind him the current view of the VR user is rendered, and we wanted to find out if there, or we want to find out if there is a specific social experience or social presence experience emerging. Okay, so these are the things we are working on. Currently we want to show our prototypes at the Ars Electronica Festival in September, and also, as I said before, at the Vienna Design Week, which will be in October. So if you're interested, you can come and test out our prototypes, and if you have any questions, I'll happy to answer them. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Or any other questions in which? Okay, so thanks again. Again, it was for me really, really nice to have like this research perspective also, like seen here. So thank you so much for that.